The night I met Dr. Evan Carter, I thought he was just the doctor who was going to save my life. I was wrong, because before I left that hospital, he leaned close to me and whispered something I'll never forget. "Noah, promise me you won't look for me after tonight." I didn't understand why a doctor would say that to a patient. But 3 weeks later, I saw Evan standing alone outside a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. He wasn't wearing his white coat. He looked nervous, and when he saw me, the color disappeared from his face. Then he said the one thing that made my heart stop. "Noah, you were never supposed to find out what happened that night." That was when I realized my feelings for him weren't the only secret between us. The night I met Dr. Evan Carter, I thought he was just another doctor in a long line of strangers trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I had no idea he would become the person I couldn't stop thinking about. It was nearly midnight when the ambulance brought me into Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. Rain covered the windows, turning the city lights outside into blurry streaks of gold and white. My head was spinning, my hands were shaking, and every few seconds I heard nurses calling out names and instructions. I wasn't seriously hurt, at least that's what everyone kept telling me. But I was scared. I'd been driving home after a late shift at a small coffee shop when another car ran a red light. I had swerved, hit the curb, and slammed my shoulder against the door. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that should have changed my life. Until a calm voice came from beside my bed. "Mr. Bennett?" I opened my eyes. He was standing there wearing navy blue scrubs beneath a white coat. He looked younger than I expected a doctor to look. Maybe 27. Dark brown hair, tired blue eyes, and a face that somehow remained calm despite the chaos around us. "I'm Dr. Carter," he said. "Can you tell me your first name?" "Noah." "Noah. Good. Do you know where you are?" "A hospital." A faint smile appeared on his face. "That's correct. Am I dying?" The smile disappeared. "No. You're not dying." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Good." He checked my pupils, asked several questions, and carefully examined my shoulder. His hands were professional and steady. Nothing about the way he treated me suggested anything personal. And yet, I noticed everything. The slight crease between his eyebrows when he concentrated. The way he lowered his voice when I looked frightened. The tiny smile he gave whenever I tried to make a joke. I hated myself for noticing. He was my doctor. That was all. "Your scans look good," he finally said. "You have a bruised shoulder and some minor cuts. We're going to keep you here for observation for a little while." "So I get to survive?" "You're surprisingly difficult to get rid of." I laughed. For the first time that night, I felt calm. He looked at me for half a second longer than necessary. Then his expression changed. He stepped back, professional again. "I'll have the nurse bring you some water." "Doctor." He turned. "Thank you." His eyes softened. "You're welcome, Noah." Then he walked away. I watched him disappear through the emergency room doors. I told myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next several hours, different nurses came in to check on me, but Dr. Carter returned twice. The second time, he brought my discharge paperwork. "You're lucky," he said. "I keep hearing that tonight. Maybe someone upstairs likes you. Maybe." He handed me the paperwork. "Take it easy for a few days. No heavy lifting. If your pain gets worse, come back immediately." I nodded. He started walking away. "Dr. Carter?" He stopped. "Evan," he corrected quietly. I looked at him. "What?" "If you're going to keep thanking me, you can at least call me Evan." I smiled. "Okay, Evan." Something changed in his expression. It was barely noticeable, but I saw it. Then he looked away. "Good night, Noah." "Good night." I thought I would never see him again. 3 days later, I was sitting in my apartment staring at the discharge papers when I noticed something strange. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. "If anything feels wrong, return to the hospital." No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. "Evan." I should have ignored it. Instead, I smiled. For the next few weeks, I tried to return to normal. I went back to work. I complained about my shoulder. I watched too much television. I told my friends about the accident. But I never told anyone about Evan, because somehow saying his name out loud made the whole thing feel real. One Friday evening, almost 3 weeks after the accident, I stopped by a coffee shop downtown. It was raining again. Seattle seemed determined to stay gray. I ordered a latte and turned toward the window. Then I froze. A man was standing outside. Dark jacket, hands in his pockets, brown hair slightly wet from the rain. Evan. My heart immediately started beating faster. He wasn't wearing his white coat. He wasn't my doctor anymore. Not in that moment. He was just a man standing alone on a sidewalk. And when he looked through the glass and saw me, his entire expression changed. His face went pale. He stared at me like he'd just seen a ghost. I stepped outside. Evan. He didn't move. What are you doing here? He looked around before answering. I could ask you the same thing. I live 5 minutes from here. He swallowed. Right? There was something wrong. Something I couldn't understand. You okay? He nodded too quickly. Yeah. You don't look okay. I am. A silence settled between us. Rain tapped against the awning above our heads. Then Evan looked directly into my eyes. Noah, you need to promise me something. What? Don't look for me. I stared at him. What does that even mean? I mean exactly what I said. Why? He looked away. For the first time since I'd met him, Evan looked afraid. Not uncomfortable. Not nervous. Afraid. Because some things are better left alone. I felt a strange chill despite the warm coffee shop behind me. Evan, what happened? He took one step backward. I shouldn't have talked to you. Then why did you? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked into the rain. I stood there watching him disappear down the street. And for the first time, I understood something. Whatever had happened that night in the hospital wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, I woke up thinking about Evan. Not because of what he'd said. Because of the way he'd said it. Don't look for me. Most people said goodbye when they wanted you to leave them alone. Evan had sounded like he was trying to protect me. That difference stayed in my mind all day. I went to work, served coffee, smiled at customers, and pretended everything was normal. But every time the shop door opened, I found myself looking up. It was ridiculous. Evan had been my doctor. We barely knew each other. And yet somehow, he'd managed to become the first thought in my head when I woke up and the last one before I fell asleep. For the next 2 weeks, I respected his request. I didn't search for him online. I didn't go back to the hospital. I didn't ask anyone about him. I tried to move on. Then, on a cold Thursday evening, everything changed. I was leaving a small bookstore in Capitol Hill when I heard someone call my name. Noah. I turned. Evan was standing across the street. This time he wasn't alone. He was carrying a paper grocery bag and wearing a gray sweater beneath a black jacket. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he crossed the street. You shouldn't be here, he said. I almost laughed. I'm starting to think you say that every time you see me. A small smile appeared.
Igesido.
So are you following me?
No.
Good. Because that would be creepy. He laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd heard from him. And suddenly, he looked completely different. Not like Dr. Evan Carter. Just Evan. A 27-year-old man standing in the cold with groceries in his hand. What are you doing here? I asked. Buying dinner. I looked at the grocery bag. Very exciting. You'd be surprised. I doubt it. He smiled again. Then the smile faded. I should go. He turned. Wait. He stopped. You don't have to disappear every time we talk. He looked at me. I know. Then stay. For a moment I thought he would leave. Instead, he nodded toward the bookstore. Coffee? I smiled. Coffee. We walked into a small cafe around the corner. Nothing romantic happened. No dramatic confession. No tashing. We simply sat across from each other and talked. And somehow that was more dangerous. I learned that Evan had grown up in Portland but moved to Seattle for medical school. He loved old movies. He hated crowded restaurants. He couldn't cook anything more complicated than pasta. And when he was stressed, he drove around Seattle at night without having a destination. You're telling me a doctor can't cook? I can save lives. That wasn't my question. He laughed. Fair. I told him about my job, my apartment, and my obsession with terrible action movies. For the first time, we talked like two people instead of doctor and patient. Hours passed without either of us noticing. When we finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. Evan looked at me. I had a good time. Me too. He hesitated.
I'm glad.
Then he looked away. That hesitation told me everything. There was something between us. Something neither of us was willing to name. Over the next month, we started seeing each other. Occasionally. Coffee. Bookstores. Late-night walks near the waterfront. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we barely said anything. Evan never crossed a line. He never treated me like a former patient. And whenever the conversation became too personal, he pulled back. One night, we were sitting near the Seattle waterfront when I finally asked him, "Why do you keep doing that?" Doing what? Getting close to me and then disappearing. He stared at the water. I don't know. You do. He was quiet. Then he said, "Someone I cared about died." I didn't interrupt. He was my best friend. Evan continued. And I blamed myself. Why? Because I thought I could have saved him. His voice became quieter. I was still in medical school. I didn't know enough. I kept thinking that if I'd noticed something earlier, maybe he'd still be here. I looked at him. That wasn't your fault. I know that logically, but not emotionally. He nodded. Exactly. For the first time, I understood why he kept people at a distance. He wasn't cold. He was scared. Scared that caring about someone meant eventually losing them. I wanted to reach across the bench and hold his hand. I didn't. Neither did he. That restraint somehow made the moment more intimate. I don't think you're broken, I said. He looked at me. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not. I smiled. But I know you're trying. His eyes stayed on mine. And for a few seconds, the world around us disappeared. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His entire expression changed. What happened? I asked. Nothing. You look worried. He stood. I have to go. Evan.
I'm sorry.
He walked away. I watched him disappear into the night. Something was wrong. A week later, I received a message from an unknown number. There was no greeting.
No explanation.
Just a photograph. It showed Evan standing outside the hospital on the night of my accident. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood another man. A man I had never seen before. Under the photograph was one sentence. You deserve to know why Evan was there before you arrived. My hands started shaking. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Then another message appeared. Ask him about Daniel. I knew immediately that this wasn't a coincidence. And suddenly, every warning Evan had ever given me made sense. There was a secret behind that night. And somehow I was already part of it. I stared at the photograph until the screen of my phone went dark. Then I turned it back on and looked at it again. Evan was standing outside Harborview Medical Center on the night of my accident. But there was something else. The man beside him, Daniel. I didn't know who he was. Yet somehow, his name had become the key to everything Evan had refused to tell me. I called Evan. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. For the first time since meeting him, I felt angry instead of worried. The next morning, I went to the hospital. Not because I wanted medical answers. I wanted the truth. I found Evan near the staff entrance. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Noah, we need to talk. His eyes moved around the hallway. Not here. Then where? He looked exhausted. Give me an hour. I almost walked away. Then he said quietly, please. 1 hour later, we sat in his car overlooking Lake Washington. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, I held up my phone. Who is Daniel? Evan closed his eyes. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, my brother. I felt my anger disappear for a moment. Your brother. He nodded. Daniel was 29. What happened to him? He died 2 years ago. Evan's voice cracked slightly. He had a heart condition. We knew about it. He was supposed to have surgery. He looked through the windshield. But he never made it to the operating room. I waited. Why? Because he disappeared. I frowned. What do you mean? He left the hospital before the surgery. No one knew where he went. Evan's hands tightened around the steering wheel. 3 days later, we found him. I didn't ask how. I could see the pain on his face. I spent months blaming myself, he said. I was convinced I should have stopped him. I should have noticed something. I should have known he was scared. And the man in the photograph? Evan looked at me. Daniel's partner. My stomach tightened. His partner? Yes. Why was he there that night? Evan looked away. Because he thought I was hiding something. I stared at him. What were you hiding? Evan didn't answer. That's why you told me not to look for you. Yes. Why? Because the night you came into the hospital, Daniel's partner was there. I froze. What? He saw you. Why would he care about me? He thought you were connected to Daniel. The silence inside the car became unbearable. I don't understand. I know. Then explain it. Evan finally looked at me. The accident wasn't completely random. My heart dropped. What are you saying? Your car was involved in something Daniel had been investigating before he died. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. I know how it sounds.
No, Evan.
It sounds insane. I thought so too. He pulled out a folded document from the glove compartment. It contained several photographs and notes. I recognized one of the cars immediately.
Mine.
My hands went cold. Where did you get this? Daniel's files. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure if you were in danger. I stared at him. You thought I was? I still don't know. That hurt more than I expected. After everything we'd shared, he still wasn't sure whether he could trust me. Then why did you get close to me? Evan looked down. That was the mistake. What? I tried to stay away from you. His voice became quiet. But I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. He looked at me. When I first saw you in that emergency room, I recognized your name. My heart stopped. You knew me?
No.
He shook his head. I knew the name from Daniel's files. I felt betrayed. You knew something about me before I even opened my eyes. Yes. And you never told me. I was trying to protect you. By lying? I wasn't lying. You were hiding the truth. He had no answer. I opened the car door. Noah. I stepped outside. Don't. I can explain. I don't want another explanation. I walked away. For the next several days I ignored every call, every message, every attempt Evan made to contact me. I wasn't sure whether I was angry because he'd lied or because I had started caring about him before I knew the truth. Maybe both. Then, one night, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Evan. He was standing outside in the rain. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. What do you want? The truth. I almost laughed. You should have started with that. I know. He reached into his jacket and handed me an envelope. Everything is inside. I didn't take it. What is it? Daniel's final report. My expression changed. His final report? He wasn't investigating you. Then who? Evan looked directly at me. The person responsible for the accident. I took the envelope. There was someone responsible? Yes. Who? Evan hesitated. I don't know yet. I stared at him. You came all the way here to tell me you still don't know?
No.
He took a breath. I came here because I finally realized something. What? Keeping you away from the truth didn't protect you. His eyes were filled with regret. It only left you alone with questions. I looked down at the envelope, then back at him. And what happens now? Evan's voice was barely above a whisper. Now you decide whether you ever want to trust me again. He turned to leave. I watched him walk down the hallway. For the first time, I wanted to stop him. But I didn't. I closed the door. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of Daniel. Behind it, written in his handwriting, were 6 words. If anything happens to me, find Noah Bennett. I stopped breathing, because Daniel had written my name 2 years before I'd ever met Evan. I read Daniel's note at least 20 times. If anything happens to me, find Noah Bennett. My hands were shaking. I couldn't understand how a man I'd never met could have written my name 2 years before my accident. For the first time, I realized that Evan hadn't been the only one keeping secrets. Daniel had left one behind too. I spent the entire night going through the documents Evan had given me. There were old newspaper clippings, photographs, hospital records, and notes about a private research company Daniel had been investigating. But one detail kept appearing. A license plate, the same license plate from the car that had run the red light the night of my accident. By sunrise, I understood something terrifying. The crash hadn't been random. Someone had been following me, and Daniel had known about it. I called Evan. He answered immediately. "Are you okay?"
No.
There was silence. "I found the plate." "I know. You knew." "Yes." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to be certain." I closed my eyes. "Evan, I can't keep living in the middle of your secrets." "I know." "Then tell me everything." This time he did. Daniel had discovered financial misconduct at a medical research company. Before he could expose it, he died under circumstances that had never been completely explained. The investigation eventually went cold. But Daniel had hidden copies of his evidence. And somehow one of those files had been connected to my name. Not because I was involved. Because my father had unknowingly done contract work for the company years earlier. Daniel believed the company was trying to find people who had access to old records. I had no idea. Neither had my father. The accident had been meant to scare me, not kill me. That didn't make it less frightening. Evan met me that afternoon at a quiet park outside the city. For the first time, I saw him without the guarded expression he'd worn since the day we met. He looked tired, human. "I should have told you everything from the beginning," he said. "Yes. I was afraid." "Of what?" "Losing another person I cared about." I looked at him. "You barely knew me." "That was the problem." His voice shook. "I started caring about you before I understood what was happening." I didn't say anything. He continued. "I knew I couldn't be with you while I was your doctor. I knew there were things I couldn't tell you without putting you in danger. So I convinced myself that pushing you away was the right thing." "And was it?"
No.
He looked directly at me. "It was the coward's version of protection." That sentence stayed with me. For months, I'd wondered whether Evan's distance meant he didn't care. Now I finally understood. He cared too much. But caring wasn't enough. Trust had to come with it. "I need time," I said. Evan nodded. "I'll give you time." He didn't try to touch me. Didn't ask me to forgive him. He simply stood there and accepted my answer. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because, for the first time, Evan wasn't trying to control what happened next. The investigation eventually uncovered the truth. The company was charged with multiple offenses, and the person responsible for the intimidation campaign was arrested. Daniel's name was finally cleared, and the mystery surrounding his death began to make sense. But for me, the biggest change wasn't the investigation. It was Evan. Weeks passed. We didn't rush anything. We talked, sometimes for hours, sometimes only for a few minutes. He told me about his childhood. I told him about mine. He introduced me to his closest friends. I met the people who had known Daniel. Slowly, the secrets became fewer. The fear became quieter. And one evening, almost 6 months after the night we first met, we found ourselves sitting outside the same coffee shop where Evan had once told me to stay away. The city was glowing around us. Seattle's streets were wet from the rain. Evan looked at me. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd come back here with you." "I did." He smiled. "You did." Eventually, we sat quietly. Then Evan reached toward me. He stopped halfway. "Can I?" I looked at his hand, then at him. "Yes." His fingers gently wrapped around mine. Nothing dramatic happened.
No fireworks.
No music. just two people sitting together in the rain. But somehow it felt bigger than anything else. I was afraid I'd lost you, Evan whispered. You almost did. I know. I squeezed his hand. But you came back with the truth. His eyes became emotional. And you stayed. I stayed because I finally knew who you were. He smiled. Who am I? I looked at him. Not Dr. Carter. He laughed softly. Good. Just Evan. His smile widened. Just Evan. I leaned closer. He met me halfway. Our first kiss was slow and gentle. Not a desperate kiss. Not a perfect movie moment. It was something better. A choice. A choice we were finally free to make. When we pulled apart, Evan rested his forehead against mine. I spent so long believing love meant losing someone. I smiled. Maybe sometimes love means finding someone again. He looked at me. And you? What about me? Do you think you found me? I held his hand tighter.
No.
He raised an eyebrow. I smiled. I think we found each other. And for the first time since the night of the accident, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because the man I had once known only as my doctor was no longer a mystery. He was Evan, the man who had tried to push me away, the man who had finally learned that honesty mattered more than fear, and the man I chose, not because he had once saved me in a hospital, but because when everything was finally revealed, he gave me the freedom to choose him back if the story touched your heart. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Love Stories for more emotional gay romance stories. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Evan after discovering his secret? Your comment could be the beginning of our next story. Red Heart. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Hidden Love Story.